In the dawn of the new year, horror is all about the familiar turning hostile. A child's best friend doll learns your routines and decides the safest version of you is the one that can't disobey. A gorgeous New York brownstone offers you cheap rent and neighbors who stare like they're listening to something you can't hear. A doomed ship locks into polar ice, and the crew realizes the cold isn't the only thing that's hunting them. And on your TV, the camera swings behind the hero's shoulder, and suddenly, you're not watching survival horror anymore. You're trapped inside it. This week, the genre isn't kicking down the door. It's already in the room, wearing a smile that you recognize. Welcome to This Week in Horror History for January 5th through 11th. I'm your host, Enrique Couto. New year, same mission. A quick, spooky time capsule you can actually use. What dropped this week, why it matters, and, of course, what you should queue up next. In just a minute, a killer doll dances into the first horror hit of the year. A cursed apartment movie opens in New York and practically dares you to move in. An icy historical nightmare novel hits shelves and makes winter horror feel like a survival instinct. And a video game release flips the camera, flips the genre, and flips a whole generation of players into panic. Then, after the break, we're doing a deep-cut spotlight on a mean little slice of urban satanic paranoia. After that, we cover some horror-related birthdays, do a then and now comparison, and a weekly recommendation to keep your January truly haunted. January 6th, 2023, M3GAN releases in the United States, and January remembers it can be dangerous again. I actually remember seeing M3GAN right when it released in northern Michigan in the dead of winter, which, by the way, is my favorite way to vacation or work trip or whatever you want to call it, because no matter where I go, the work always finds me. But we went way up to the tip of Michigan, just beyond the Upper Peninsula, and there was a little theater in Mackinac City still open, even though only, I think, 2 restaurants were open in the entire town. So we saw M3GAN as the winter wonderland loomed around us. Quick aside, an AI doll designed to protect a child who takes that job way too literally. It's sharp, and it's funny, and it's got that clean, this thing is learning dread under all of the jokes. It reportedly cost about $12 million to produce and went on to make $180 million worldwide, which is horror math for instant franchise. Unfortunately, M3GAN 2 did not set the whole world on fire. They took a really different approach, which I appreciated quite a bit. It just didn't quite click with the movie-going public at large, costing between $15 and $25 million and doing just $39.1 million at the box office. But I still think there's a lot to like about M3GAN 2.0. But I digress. The original will turn into a modern classic as time marches on. You can watch M3GAN streaming on Peacock with a premium subscription. It's also available via add-on with channels like Stars on Apple TV, and widely available to rent or buy on Apple TV, Amazon Video, and Fandango at home. And if you didn't expect a January release to become a full-on pop culture moment, well, the doll disagreed. January 10th, 1997, The Relic hits theaters and turns a museum gala into a monster movie panic attack. Gala? I always said gala. Yeah, gala. If you've never revisited The Relic, it's got a great hook to it. A deadly creature loose inside Chicago's Field Museum, and all the worst possible people trapped inside during a fancy opening night event. It's kind of like Jurassic Park, but the anxiety is filtered through a 90s thriller lens with moody lighting, big corridors, and that something is moving in the vents kind of dread. It's also an example of the non-Scream inspired 1990s horror, which I think time has been very kind to and people are learning to appreciate. Box office-wise, it wasn't quite a performer. The production budget was commonly reported around $60 million, and it brought in just $34 million domestic and around $48 million worldwide, making it not a hit by any stretch, but still very worth a revisit. You can check it out currently free on Tubi TV, and it's available to rent or buy on platforms like Apple TV, Amazon Video, and Fandango at Home. I know it's the same list every time, but that's where they are, damn it. January 8th, 2007, Dan Simmons' The Terror is published. Inspired by the real Franklin expedition, it drops you into the Arctic with trapped ships, dwindling supplies, and something out there in the dark, patient as the ice. Even if you know the history, Simmons turns it into a slow, grinding nightmare of leadership, paranoia, and survival. It'll definitely keep you riveted. This is the kind of book where the environment is already the monster, and then the story adds a second monster, just for good luck. The Terror is widely available in print, Kindle ebook, and audiobook on Audible, perfect for a cold night when you want your cozy blanket to feel like a false sense of security. January 11th, 2005, Resident Evil 4 hits North America on the GameCube, and survival horror changes shape. The over-the-shoulder camera becomes the new language, the pacing gets faster, and the fear, well, it gets a lot closer. You're not exploring a haunted house so much as managing panic while the world lunges for your throat. It's still horror. It's an isolated village. It's got cult energy, body horror creatures galore, and, of course, resource stress because it's a video game, but it plays like a pressure cooker. And if you were there in 2005, which I was, you remember the sensation. The genre didn't just level up, it changed its heartbeat. And I could never finish the game on my own. I would always get a friend to complete the game. I'm a wimpy horror video game player. I get very, very scared. I usually make Rachel play the game while I watch. As far as how to play it now, well, it's available on PC and on Steam in the Ultimate HD Edition, and it's been re-released on multiple modern consoles over the years, so if you're a gamer, just put your mind to it. This Week in Horror History is brought to you in part by Cozy Earth, one of the best sources for luxurious bamboo sheets, pajamas, loungewear, robes, and so much more. For me, nothing beats a great bathrobe when you want to relax, kick back, and scare yourself silly, and Cozy Earth has plenty of options whether you want loungewear or to have that warm, snugly soft feeling in your bed at night, while you hope for some nightmares. And right now, if you head to CozyEarth.com and find something you love, you can use promo code SPOOKY at checkout and get 41% off your first order. Not only do you get great sheets, loungewear, and more at a great price, it supports the podcast directly. So head to CozyEarth.com and use promo code SPOOKY for 41% off your order. Thank you, my spookies, for checking out Cozy Earth and using our code, and a huge thank you to Cozy Earth for their support. All right, take a breath, because we're about to step into New York City in 1977. Imagine a gorgeous old building, a bargain apartment, and a hallway that feels 1 degree colder than it should. You hear your neighbors at night, soft voices, strange chanting, a shuffle of feet. You knock on the door, and they smile like you interrupted something sacred. And the worst part, they act like you are the rude one. Welcome back to This Week in Horror History. Without further ado, let's get into our deep-cut spotlight. Released January 7th, 1977, The Sentinel opens in New York City, and it's one of the meaner new apartment movies ever made. A young model moves into a Brooklyn Heights brownstone that's been carved into apartments, and the building is owned by the Catholic Diocese for a reason. And for those keeping score, the film first played in New York City, but then rolled out wider in the United States on February 11th, 1977. It's pure accumulation horror, wrongness stacking up until you simply can't ignore it anymore. A staircase that feels like it leads somewhere it shouldn't, a neighbor who watches a little too long, a party that curdles the moment you realize the guests aren't acting like guests. And it's got that very specific 1970s flavor of city dread, like the whole neighborhood is tired, humid, and angry, and somehow the building is feeding off of it. The movie loves locked doors, narrow hallways, and the feeling that privacy is a myth. Even the quiet scenes feel almost crowded. Then it hits the point every great bad apartment or bad apartment building story hits. The realization that, well, you're not just living there, you're being kept there. And when it finally decides to go full nightmare, it doesn't hold back. This is a film that wants you unsettled, and it's very, very good at it. Definitely worth a revisit, one that I realized was truly underrated. As far as where to watch it, well, it's available on the usual suspects for rent, Amazon Video, Apple TV, and Fandango at home, even Google Play and YouTube if you're feeling saucy. Give this one a watch and help your January be extra chilling. Time to light a candle on a cake that you found in the creepy basement freezer. January 6th, 1969 is the day Norman Reedus was born. If modern zombies taught us anything, it's that survival horror is mostly exhaustion, and Reedus made that exhaustion iconic. Of course, referring to his role as Daryl in The Walking Dead, and of course he was also legendary even before that for the cult hit Boondock Saints. Happy birthday, Norman Reedus. On January 7th, 1964, Nicolas Cage was born. When Cage goes horror, like Mandy, Color Out of Space, Renfield even, which is a very underrated and very fun horror comedy, he goes full tilt like he's daring the nightmare to out-weird him, and it never, ever is able to. It's not quite horror, but it's somewhat adjacent. If you haven't seen Nicolas Cage in the film Pig, P-I-G, check that out. It's worth your time. Happy birthday, Nicolas Cage. January 8th, 1947, David Bowie is born. A man who is not only a rock icon, but had some very interesting connections to horror and pop culture in general as far as the big screen was concerned. From The Hunger to Labyrinth, Bowie's screen presence always felt like a beautiful spell. Glamorous, eerie, and, of course, a little dangerous. Happy birthday to David Bowie. Worth mentioning, by the way, my mother likes to name dogs after actors, and her current bulldog's name is Bowie. Of course, I was always partial, and this is not a joke or a punchline, I was always partial to her miniature poodle named Dreyfus, after Richard Dreyfuss. Yeah, Mom's a little bit of a nerd. The apple don't fall far from the tree. On January 9th, 1955, J.K. Simmons was born. Known for playing roles like friendly authority figures or calm professionals or quiet menace, Simmons can do all of them with ease and sometimes even in the same scene when he's got to, which is basically horror casting gold. And while he hasn't appeared in a ton of horror movies, at least not consistently, he did play a killer in You Can't Run Forever from 2024, and I loved his role in Dark Skies from 2013. But one thing is certain, even in the dramas he's performed in, like the TV series Oz on HBO, or the incredible movie about being your best and standing up for yourself, Whiplash, he is always a standout and always able to make you scared. So happy birthday, J.K. Simmons. And for our then and now, first I'm going to take you down to the Raccoon City where the grass is green and the girls are zombies. It didn't rhyme, but it worked. On January of 2005, we got Resident Evil 4, the moment that survival horror learns to move more like an action movie without losing its bite of fear. In fact, it becomes more kinetic with pressure, speed, and the constant math of, do I have enough to survive the next 30 seconds? Definitely one of the games that set up the modern horror game mechanics for decades to come and consistently scaring the crap out of me. When it comes to now, January horror is still obsessed with the familiar turning predatory, like the aforementioned M3GAN reminding us that helpful technology is only helpful until it decides your feelings are a threat. Different decades, same fear. The thing closest to you becomes the thing that's coming for you. And for our weekly recommendation, one of my all-time favorites, Warlock from 1989. Time travel satanic panic with a real video store after midnight kind of glow to it, or at the very least a very late-night cable when you should be in bed mentality. If you want something that plays like a pulpy, fast-moving occult thriller, this is the pick. Warlock began its U.S. release this week in 1991, starting on January 11th, and it's a lean piece of demon is loose in the modern world style chaos. Julian Sands is fantastic. As is proven by the later Warlock sequels, he really does make the character work. He's elegant and cruel and completely convinced the end times are just a scheduling problem. It's got chases and curses, bizarre and disgusting practical effects, and that previously mentioned 90s feel pre-Scream. There's something cozy and creepy about 1990s horror before it all became meta and slasher and attractive kids from Dawson Creek style. Not that there's anything wrong with that era, but this one really leans into that 90s aesthetic that I believe time has become very, very kind to. It also doesn't overstay its welcome. It's spooky, it's mean, and it moves right along. On a box office note, it pulled in about $9.1 million domestically, And while that didn't set the world on fire against its $15 million budget, the film became a mainstay on cable and home video, so much so that in 1993 there was a sequel, Warlock: The Armageddon, also starring Julian Sands, that is a lot of fun to watch. And of course in 1999 you got Warlock 3, which was a movie, and it wasn't that bad, but it just can't hold a candle to Julian Sands' performance. He really owned the Warlock character. I can't recommend enough that you take a look at Warlock, whether it's the first time or you're revisiting it. It's available to watch streaming on Prime Video and Freevee with ads. You could also rent or purchase it on services like Apple TV, Amazon Video, Google Play, and so on and so forth. But really, give this one a revisit. And that's your horror history for January 5th through the 11th. Killer Dolls, Cursed Apartments, Arctic Nightmares, and the moment survival horror learned how to sprint and not just run a marathon. Tomorrow, which is Wednesday, we kick off a brand new 4-part Weekly Spooky miniseries dropping every Wednesday, and it's called Banned. Imagine, if you will, a snowed-in horror convention, a lodge full of fans, egos, handlers, and bad blood. And then, somebody turns up dead. Not just dead, but marked. One word, carved like a curse. Banned. Make sure you're subscribed and tune in tomorrow. Until next time, stay safe, stay spooky, and if you find an apartment that's too cheap to be real with a no questions asked lease, well, ask at least one question. I'll be back next week with more of history and horror, but just remember, our days are numbered. That's how we tell them apart.